Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Construction Over Coffee. I'm your host, Jeff Raymond, and I have with me here today Tommy Osborne, the Executive Director of Construction over at the Northwest Independent School District down in Texas. Tommy, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Okay, so we got a lot to talk about today. Let's kick it off with, you just telling us a little bit about you, what you do, and what a day in the life might look for.
Wow, the day in the life part changes with a phone call, as I'm sure you can understand. So my background is technically trained as an architect. I was in the architecture world practicing for about 24 years, and then had an opportunity to go over to the owner side. So I worked for a nonprofit for a few years. And then had an opportunity to work with Northwest Independent School District, which is located about 26 miles due north of Fort Worth in the North Texas area. And so it was a really neat opportunity. Most of my background, most of the projects I did as an architect were K through 12, so public schools, some higher ed. But public school, public educators, it's just in my family. My wife's an educator, my sister's an educator, aunts, uncles have all been teachers. So to be able to build some of these schools and the learning environments for the future leaders of the country really brings my two passions together, and that's doing some good architecture and just building the buildings. That's where I think the most fun is in architecture. And so this is really a great opportunity for me. So a little bit about Northwest ISD. We are one of the fastest growing school districts in the state of Texas. We encompass 234 square miles, so we're a very large school district. The map that is behind me is an aerial image of that area. We're probably 28% built out. So we've got about 26,000 students. When we're built out, we'll be well north of 100,000. We'll be actually a larger school district than Fort Worth is right now. Over the next 20, 30 years, this area is going to change dramatically. So it's great job security. As long as our voters continue to approve our bonds, and as long as folks are still moving into this area, we'll have plenty to do.
Trend is likely to continue with what we're seeing.
Yeah, we've got about 120 active home site developments going on in our district right now. And when I started with Northwest 2 years ago, we had about 84. So even during the pandemic, the home market here did not really slow down. Because it's mostly ranch and farmland. The available land to develop is here. And so you're getting some 1 acre, half acre home sites, which are very desirable.
Yes.
And so you've got some opportunity with that, with doing some really neat development. So we've got everything from what we would consider a small development of about maybe 500 homes to some very large ones between 3,000 and 5,000 home sites. So the people are moving here, and they're bringing their kids with them. So we've got to just keep building the schools to keep up with it.
Texas is one of the fastest growing markets, and in terms of people living there and moving there. What we're seeing, I was looking at some articles and some sources earlier today, is for every one person that leaves Texas, depending on the city and locality, anywhere from 3 to 6 people are moving in for everyone that leaves. And those numbers are pretty in line with what we're seeing in some areas of the Midwest and the South. And the construction in terms of size and volume on the residential side is really similar to what we're seeing in Florida. Jacksonville, Tampa, Fort Myers, those areas are just, Orlando, those areas are just booming with construction sites between 50 and 5,000 units per development. So no surprise there. I know a day in the life can change in the blink of an eye, or as you said, in the course of one phone call. Where are you spending most of your time these days?
So, because we are sort of at the end of our 2017 bond, a lot of the projects that were included in that are now wrapping up. So, um, because we had to delay our bond from last May, a year ago, to this past November, we didn't have that constant next flow of supply chain of projects. So we had to wait until this past May to hold another bond. And so thankfully our constituents and voters approved the bond. And so we are just about to have probably one of the busiest summers we've had in a long time. But typically, you know, the beginning of the week is staff meetings, just keeping up with any issues that are going on within the school district. But then throughout the day, from, you know, basically Tuesday through Friday, it's what we call OAC meetings, owner architect contractor meetings, our weekly job site meetings. And I'll have anywhere from 2 or 3 of those a day, Tuesday through Thursday. And then Friday is what I try to keep Friday open for, is just getting caught up. Because when you're out and about, you know, even with, you know, having the benefit of having a cell phone,
Mm-hmm.
you can't always keep up with emails. If you're going to be in a meeting, you need to be present and participate in it. And so,
Mm-hmm.
just making sure that I'm staying aware of where we are on different projects so that I can relay that onto my boss. Just that backlog of email. So I try to keep Friday open to be able to do that, and just so that way I end the week without having you know, several hundred emails in my
Right.
inbox going into the weekend.
Right. Now, prior to this show starting, you mentioned that your team is fairly backlogged, which is a good thing, better than the alternative. How
Right.
many years would you say of work you have out there in front of you right now for the team?
Uh, this current bond we're anticipating. So the current bond that just passed is just under 800 million. And that's not all just construction. Some of that's technology upgrades. Some of that's buying some new buses. I'm going to be responsible for about 725 million of that, which will be either new schools or addition and renovations. And that will get us through the next 3 years. So in about two
Oh,
years, we'll start planning for the next bond. And that one will probably be another sizable one, because we'll have our fourth high school in that one. And also with that fourth high school will be the need for a new football stadium. And so we kind of went through a whole myriad of scenarios with our long range bond planning committee. They wanted us to push the bond out a little bit more, as far as maybe 5 to 7 years. So we weren't going back to the voters every 3 years for a new bond.
sure.
That just really increased the bond package. So we were pushing $1 billion in the bond that went out in November, which didn't pass for any number of reasons. It was just bad timing. It was, you know, around
Mhm.
the presidential campaign. And so we had a lot more people that came out to vote that normally didn't vote for our bond. So because we encompass such a large area, we're 234 square miles, as I said, but that's also
Wow.
3 counties, Denton, Tarrant, and Wise County here in North Texas. But it also incorporates 14 different municipalities. So a lot of small cities
Wow.
in this area. And so normally we'll have about 5,000, 7,000 voters come out for a bond. But because we had the presidential election, we had over 55,000 people come out to vote. So in that, you've got a lot of
Wow.
people that are not connected to the school district. And so they are just not as well informed as to what the issues are and what the needs are. And so if you
Mhm.
don't have a connection to the school district and you say, oh, they're going to raise my taxes because of the bonds, then I'm going to vote no. The unique thing about Northwest is, because we have so many home developers in this area, so what was agricultural land, which is tax exempt, when it becomes a home development, now it's taxable. And so we could have passed that $1 billion bond and not raised anybody's home taxes.
Wow.
because of the offset of what will become new taxable land.
Just goes to demonstrate, know what you're voting for.
Exactly, exactly.
That's a pretty significant turnout when you're expecting, say, 7,000 and you get 55,000. I don't think anyone could have seen that coming.
We really didn't want to do it in November. We try to avoid November elections as much as possible, but
Sure.
you know, 2020, when March 2020 hit and the pandemic hit, the governor of Texas said there will be no elections in May. We used some political clout to appeal to him to see if we could maybe do one in June or July. And he said absolutely not. So that forced us to go to November. And so we had a pretty good feeling going into that we were going to be unsuccessful. And it was about a 60-40 thumbs down. So we weren't too surprised by that. But we were, you know, we learned a lot by doing that, as far as, because we used to have a lot of in-person town halls at every campus in our district, which we couldn't do. And so we just found new ways to do these town hall meetings this spring virtually. And we did have some in person, but, you know, obviously social distance, had to wear masks. And so I think we learned a lot last fall that helped us be more successful this spring.
Awesome. One of the biggest challenges we're seeing, no matter what niche or specialty you're in with construction, is the rise in prices. And everyone is focused on lumber because it's made a near meteoric rise. And if you're a homeowner, you're paying about $32,000 to $48,000 more on average for the price of a home. But it seems everything else is getting more expensive too. Tell us what you're seeing and what's been impacting you.
So what our contractor partners have been telling us is that, yeah, you know, the steel's gone up, which has forced concrete to go up. Anything that's got metal in it, you know, light fixtures, even furniture. So even our FF&E packages are going up, but it's really the lead time. So during the pandemic, when plants shut down, they still had inventory on the shelves. Well, that's all depleted now. So now when these new orders are coming in, there's no backlog of inventory to be able to ship out. So a lot of the manufacturers are not only trying to fill these new orders, but also be able to put some things on the shelves. And so the only way you can slow that down is by increasing your prices. And so literally, Jeff, everything we're seeing across the board is going up, and we're bidding projects now that you know, last spring when we were ready to pull the trigger on some projects. One of our new middle schools, we actually bid it before the November election, so that if it did pass, we were ready to go, since we were already, you know, 6 months behind schedule on getting that started. And it came in $15 million under budget. And so we were absolutely thrilled. But then when the bond didn't pass, we just knew that we're not going to see that kind of savings. And so we're rebidding that project. The bid date is in mid-June. And we still expect it to be under budget some, but it'll probably be in the single digits, you know, we're, as far as millions of dollars. We're not going to get a $15 million savings on this one. We'll be happy if we're a few $1 million under budget on this one. And so we're also being told steel is at a high price now that a lot of the contractors haven't seen since the early 1940s. So you're talking almost 100 years, 80 years, and that steel deck and joists are 8 to 9 month lead times. And so that's a schedule buster. So for this middle school, which we're giving ourselves 24 years to build this middle school, that's just so that we can get materials ordered and get them on the site by when we need them, just sequentially. So we will release this package once we bid it, and we probably won't even start turning dirt for a few months. just so that we don't get too far out ahead of ourselves and or standing around waiting. But it's, you know, at first, like you said, it was lumber and steel and some concrete, but now it's everything's being impacted by elevators, light fixtures. If they're coming from overseas, you know, tiles. You know, yeah, it's sitting outside of Los Angeles on a boat, and it could be a month before they can get that thing unloaded.
Yep.
So there's just nothing that we are seeing that's not impacted in the construction industry. If it's not locally sourced, thankfully we've got some masonry plants, some brick plants around the area. That's
Mhm.
about it, you know. But if you don't have the steel ties that put it up, or the walls to support it, then you've just got a bunch of bricks sitting around waiting for the rest of it to come
Yep.
along.
We're seeing materials across the board, you know, metals getting smoked as well.
Yep.
And then in the underlying, the transportation costs, the labor, not
Yep.
only to build and assemble on your side, but the labor to transport, the
Yep.
gasoline and fuel costs to transport that. And then the lead time and the backlogs is crazy. I think, you know, this pandemic has accelerated the desire of folks to have home ownership or to move, you know, to areas that they feel will be better for them as the future unfolds. And it's like a rush of everyone to get in the elevator at once,
Yeah.
you know? So a lot of what we're seeing is really that combination of inflation, higher cost, but the weight. And it's not just limited to commercial construction or really any construction. Go try to buy a new couch, a new sectional, go buy a new car and see not only the cost, but the weight and the lead time, and the delay to get that, especially if it's coming from overseas.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, the housing market here, you know, I know it's kind of crazy everywhere, but here in North Texas,
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing it's a seller's market. I mean, my wife and I literally had this conversation last night. We are not in the market to move, but she's like, we should sell our house because we could get probably
Top
100,
dollar.
$200,000 more than it's valued for. And she said it's almost silly not to be able to recoup that sort of a profit. And so it's something we're actually considering doing. You know, do we sell our house and either move in with some family for 6, 8 months? But the problem is, it's a horrible time to buy a house or even build. You know, and so some of these home builders that we have out here, they're almost thinking they're going to have to hold off because the prices are getting so escalated that they're getting outside of what their normal range is for their development. So it's you know, it's you know, people always talked about living through history during the pandemic, but I think we're doing that exact same thing through the housing market. I've got some friends that are realtors, and they're just like, we have never in our lifetime ever experienced anything like this.
It's interesting too. Not only have prices gone through the roof, but if you do end up selling your house, you'll learn that you probably don't have to do any work to it.
Not a
We've,
bit. Not a
we've been
bit.
seeing homes go the residential side with no inspection.
Yeah.
A lot of cash buyers up here in the Northeast. A lot of what we're seeing, and down, I guess, in the Southeast and Midwest too. A lot of folks that are moving from higher cost of living areas like New York, Massachusetts, California. You know, when they sell their home, they're netting it for, I think, ridiculous money, and they're able to bring most, if not all, of that cash to closing. And you're seeing offers that are not only 10, 20, 30% above ask, but a lot of them are all cash.
Yep.
And those sellers are making little, if any, repairs whatsoever.
Yeah.
No inspection. It's crazy. You know, I think we'll be, you know, we're going to be transitioning down south over the next year or two. And what we're seeing up here, especially in the Northeast, is nuts, is the only
Yeah.
way to put it.
Yeah, it really is. It's like I say, it's historical. It's unheard of.
Yeah, I think this boom, from what we're seeing, and you know, from talking with people, feet in the street, boots on the ground, this boom is likely to continue on the residential and commercial side for, on a low estimate, 2 years, up to 5 years before you get any sense of things really slowing down. Now, of course, that's barring any bizarre political, geographical, if something really out of the ordinary hits, that could change it. But we're seeing anywhere from 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, there's been talk of because of just what we're seeing in construction that could trigger recession. But I do think that especially for us in this part of the country, in this part of Texas, that's probably, like I said, 2 years down the road before I think it will impact us. I mean, even in 2008, 9, 10, when we had that recession, the North Texas area, we were still getting a ton of people moving here
Yeah.
because the economy was stable. We're really geographically in a great spot because we've got Dallas Fort Worth Airport, which is one of the major airports in the country. You can fly to either coast for a meeting, be back home that night for dinner. The climate, you can play golf here 12 years out of the month. It's a very international city. A lot of people from different parts of the area are moving to this part of the country. And so we're really fortunate to have that and to be able to continue to feed our economy even when other parts of the country are suffering a little bit. So we're really quite fortunate in that regard.
The way we've seen it painted is it's almost like a tale of two economies where, and I've talked about this on previous shows, a lot of what we've seen is really geographically based. To certain areas of the country are doing better than others. From talking to people who have been in construction for 20, 30 years, they said, 2020 was obviously weird, but compared to 2008, it was just different. Obviously, two completely different causes. But, in talking to people in construction, they felt like 2008 was never going to end.
Right.
Like that was it. And you had a lot of people that left the industry. And I think a lot of them that left, they left it for good with no intention of returning.
Yeah.
But the major difference that was painted between 2008 and 2020 is obviously there was a dip, but the dip seemed a little deeper, but much quicker in 2020. There wasn't that really 2 to, depending where you lived, 3 to 5 year time to recover. In some places it was like, okay, there was a month or 2 or 3 months of, it was strange, but now it's booming.
Yeah. We really never slowed down here construction wise, at least commercially. The governor right off the bat said construction is an essential business. It's an essential industry. And, we had several schools that were under construction. And so we just had to keep going. And our contractor partners did a great job of keeping their staff and their subs safe. And so we never saw an entire sub of electricians get wiped out with getting sick. What we saw was there would be a challenge for a few of those guys with the kids having to stay home. Okay, hey, I've got to stay home today so my wife can go to work, or so somebody can go run errands or do whatever they needed to do. And so we never really saw it slow down. We tried to run some projects remotely, but as you can't remotely build buildings. And so we did what we had to do to stay safe, but also to stay on schedule and get the schools open. So yeah, I think you're right. I think the residential area, we've probably got a year or two window that this market's going to stay hot. And so that's why, like I said, my wife and I are seriously considering, because we just renovated our house 5, 6 years ago, thinking we would be in this house till we retire. And here we are thinking, oh, let's just, sell it and pocket some money and see what our options are. So interesting times we're living in.
It's funny on the podcast, we have a lot of folks that are, again, from the Midwest and South. And the theme I see is Texas and Florida, man. They are just the two brightest spots, I think, economy wise. And they almost feel like their own country in terms of, the stuff that's happening there.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to see. Um, so obviously the rise in materials has been hurting people. We're seeing labor cost obviously increase, but we're also seeing labor shortages across the market, and that is almost in every region of the country. What are you folks seeing on the ground in terms of labor or labor shortages, and how are you navigating that?
We've had a labor shortage in Texas for, I would say, 5, 6 years. Um, and it's a lot of the skilled labor trades. But here during the pandemic, I think Texas was one of the hardest hit states. Obviously we have a lot of migrant labor that comes in, which really that faucet got turned off during
Mhm.
over the last several years. But what we have really seen is that skilled labor, so masons, welders, a lot of finished carpentry folks,
Mhm.
those trades are just not there. And so one of the great things that the CTE programs here at Northwest ISD are focusing on are a lot of those. So we've got great welding programs where these young men and women are graduating high school with welding certificates, and they can leave high school, get a decent job, and make a nice living as a 18, 19-year-old, young adult. Making $80,000 a year as a welder. I would have
With
no
no
idea what
debt.
I'm doing with that kind of money at that age, but
Mhm.
that's an opportunity that these kids are walking out of here with, and it's really cool to see. And so because we have done some CTE projects, I've gotten to a real good relationship with our CTE executive director, Celine Braswell. And I'm like, Celine, we need to expand this program as much as
Yeah.
possible. Getting into HVAC, electrical, and some of these other industries that there are really, really nice careers to be had in these areas. And I just don't think a lot of the young people right now, when you talk about construction, they're thinking about just rough carpentry or pouring concrete. And,
Mhm.
those are all necessary jobs. And that's a great way to get your feet wet and get into it. And, even when I was practicing in architecture, I would tell young architects, I was like, dude, you need to spend a summer pouring concrete or
Yeah.
doing some housing. And so that, one, I think it makes you a better designer because you know how materials go together, and you know how difficult it is to have some of these materials go together, and you understand just because you can draw it doesn't mean it can be built that way. And so I think it
Right.
helps become better in that trade. But yeah, we've got a huge shortage, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. But it will become that critical mass where sooner or later it won't be the material pricing that's going to be what's really killing us. It's going to be just a labor shortage.
We're telling clients now, start prepping in Q3 for the discussions to be had in Q4 for implementation for Q1 of next year for salary increases. And I think what's really caught a lot of people off guard is you turn on the news, you look at things, and it seems like things have just been horrible and no one's able to find a job. And, it's awful. That's true for some industries and locations. But if you're a talented person in the construction field, you're busy. If you want to change employers, it's relatively easy for you to do so. But what we're seeing is employers are struggling because they're still in the 2008, 2009 mindset where they believe the right people will just come to me. It doesn't work like that. They're using outdated old strategies to try to, hope the right person applies. And, I think they need to realize that it doesn't matter if you're an electrician, a carpenter, a project manager, a director of construction. It doesn't matter what you do. You have choices, you have options. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're ready to jump. If you're in a position you like, you're probably staying there, you're probably getting promoted, but it is a candidate market right now. And
Yeah,
what worked 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, is not working now. So companies that are unwilling to realize and adapt to that and change and use practices and methods that work, they're going to be left in the dust. I think they're going to be left outside.
I would equate it to very similar to like the housing market, where some of these folks that are wanting to buy a house, they are bringing cash and they're buying houses, no inspection, sight unseen. I've even heard of some buyers offering to buy the seller's next home just to get it. And I think
That's a new one.
yeah, and some of these employers, I think, are gonna see that as well. Hey, look, I'll send you to trade school. I'll have you
Yep.
go to, I'll pay for you to go to a VOTEC to accelerate that timeline, because
Mhm.
in construction, you don't learn construction in a book. I mean, you understand the business end of construction and you understand what it takes, but really to get good at anything in this industry, it's a investment in your time and your labor. And there's no real way to short cycle that. And so I think by some of these CTE programs being out there and kids taking advantage of it, they're able to graduate high school with a certain level of skill that they can contribute right away. But then when these contractors see that, hey, if we could just invest in them a little bit more at a couple year trade school or something like that, it can really launch them into being a leader of a crew or some things like that that could really benefit them. A little bit of investment by the owner of the business gets you a dedicated employee that could be with you for their entire career.
It's a really good point. I could see employers offering to pay for training, education, just to help them get their foot in the door.
Absolutely.
We talk a lot on the show about the reasons behind the skilled trade, the craftsman shortage. And, I think people forget that 2008, 9, 10, it was horrific for people in the industry. If you were affected by it, it was traumatizing. And again, I think a lot of folks that left the industry had no intention of coming back, and a good portion of them still haven't come back. What we're seeing now is if you were in hospitality, for example, those folks are very hesitant to come back to that field, and they're looking at new careers where that may not be as recession prone. So they're looking at careers like construction. We're seeing a lot of hospitality folks, starting a career in construction. They want something more stable. But going back to where I think the shortage is coming from is, one, a lot of it is hard work. We can't deny that. It's, and I guess everyone's definition of work and hard work is different. Physically, it can be very demanding depending on the field you're in. It can be long hours. It can be unpredictable schedules. But I think what it really boils down to is young men and women are not told growing up that construction is a great career, a lot of options, and it's viable. They're told it's a dirty industry and it's a second or third or fourth choice. People here go to college, become a doctor, a lawyer, go into tech, go into finance, which is fine if that's your thing. But they're not told, hey, go to trade school, come out with zero debt, come out making 60, 70, 80, $100,000 a year, depending on your profession. A lot of folks that get in construction, they either fall into it or they have family or friends that were in it and expose it to them. And that stigma, I think, really needs to be overcome, and it needs to start at a young age for it to be effective.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, absolutely agree with you, Jeff. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's not glamorous, it's not sexy, but there are some amazing careers to be had. And, there's, even as an architect, when I was practicing in that profession, there was nothing more gratifying than getting a project done, being able to shake the contractor's hand, know that you were part of this team that built this amazing facility, and have the owner go, man, this is so much better than I ever anticipated. And, that was a job well done. And being able to make something with your hands and know that it's going to be there for 50, 60, we build schools that are going to outlast us. That's a legacy. That's something really cool to, as when I'm at the end of my career and being able to drive through this area and go, yep, built that, and that'll be here long after I'm gone, and know that I was a part of that is something pretty cool. Not to to knock any other profession, but there's not a lot of other professions that that you're going to have that kind of legacy like you do in construction. Buildings, especially, you know, schools, civic buildings, skyscrapers, those will be around for hundreds of years, you know, and to be a part of that is really something special that I don't think a lot of young people think about.
I agree. I mean, you know, you can build teams, you can build businesses, you can build products, right? Like, you know, we have an I work with a company, you know, they do IT staffing, and they have people, IT recruiting, excuse me, not staffing, but they have people that build really cool stuff and they go on the web and they look at it. But for me, that's not really what I'm connected to. You know, having family in construction, growing up around it, you know, being able to see something you built, showing your family, your friends, you drive by it. You know, we hear people that work in the field say, you know, I drove by with my family, and you know, we drove past that new office building that
Yeah,
took 5 years to build, and
right.
every time we drive by it, I feel this sense of pride and accomplishment or esteem, because I know that I, you know, put the foundation in there, or I oversaw the project, or I did, you know, the roughing, I did the wiring, I did whatever it may be, the drywall. And it's a certain sense of accomplishment that I think, you know, resonates with certain people. And if that is what someone wants to do, it not only needs to be reinforced as a potential option, but it can be reinforced as the right option for people. You know, again, there's nothing wrong with going to school, getting a degree, but it's really not for everybody. So assuming this linear one size fits all approach, I think it's doing a lot more harm than good. You know, among the myriad of benefits of, you know, pursuing a career in the trades, if you decide not to go to school, great, you saved yourself who knows how many tens, or in some cases hundreds of thousand
Yeah,
dollars in debt.
yeah,
And for folks that have that student debt and that life debt from not working for anywhere from 2 to 10 years, depending on your path, that debt can be crushing. It can be soul sucking. And for folks that want to get to work either during or right after high school, this is one of the few, I think, industries that can allow you to do it and allow you to do it almost immediately. Um, Another, I think, often overlooked aspect of why there's such a shortage is a lot of companies don't really have a onboarding or a training and mentoring and career advancement path in place. If you don't have onboarding, training, mentoring, and career advancement, if those paths are not cleanly laid out, how do you implement them? How do you measure them?
yeah,
Um, you know, what we talk about right now is a lot of the smaller contractors and the smaller businesses in the industry, they're getting squashed.
yeah,
And you know, obviously it's with cost, but what we're seeing is the big players, shout out to JE Dunn especially, they do a great job at doing this. Their mentoring and their training and development program, whether it's leadership, whether it's you know, skilled trades, I mean, they have it down. And you know, when people want to go to these large companies, yeah, it's some of it's for the notoriety of saying, look, I work for the Skanska, I work for the JE Dunns, I work for the Walshes, the Suffolks, right? But a lot of it is they have that training program down, and you can take your career in a direction that you simply couldn't going at a company that has 10, 15 people that doesn't see the value in ongoing training.
yeah,
And I think without that training, a lot of people that could stay in the trades, they get burned out, they quit, they feel it might be a dead end, and that's that for them. So that's another thing that really needs to get looked at over the next few years if we want to shrink that skills gap and shrink that labor gap.
yeah. I couldn't agree more with you, Jeff. You're absolutely right.
Cool. Um, so I want to talk about what changed for you and your team during the pandemic, whether it's what you started or stopped using in terms of technology, you know, what may have changed in your day to day. What was, you know, what did 2020, how did that impact you in your team in that regard?
Well, that's an excellent question because, like I said, you know, we learned pretty quick you can't build a building by a Zoom call.
No.
What it did allow us to do was more frequently check in with each other. So, you know, a lot of the guys that I work with are old, you know, contractors or skilled tradesmen that now work for the school district and oversee a lot of our projects. And so they, uh, you know, I'm probably lucky for them to just stay up with their emails, much less I would say, hey, now we need to
Right.
get on the Zoom call, right? And okay, unmute yourself. And they're just like, you know, so some of it was a little comedic at first, but um, it did allow us to check in with each other more frequently. And just, you know, because we were isolated there for a few weeks, just to be able to see another face outside of your house was
Yeah.
comfort, you know, to just, hey, I saw you, you look good, everybody good, all right, cool, thumbs up. Uh, so
Right.
that did um, allow us to do that early on. And then then for us, it was just a matter of making sure that when we were having meetings that had to be in person, that we had to adjust the location sometimes. Like, so if we're going to have 7 or 8 people at this meeting, we weren't going to be able to do it in the job trailers because those are just, you know, not the most spacious places. And so we would have to find a
Yeah.
place either in the job site or outside, weather permitting, that we could still hold an efficient meeting and get the information or get whatever we had to do signed. So I'll tell you, one of the things that really helped that the contractors loved was our pay app process. Because as opposed to having 3 hard copies of anywhere of, you know, 20 to sometimes 100 pages of backup documents on these pay apps, it was all electronic, and we
Yeah.
viewed them electronically. So the architects got them quicker. I got them quicker from the architects. We were able to sign and approve and get them to our accounts payable quicker. And so that process has sped up dramatically, which I think has helped everybody. You know, it's getting money into the pockets of people that need it, which helps the economy. And so that for us has been a godsend, because now we're just not having to deal with these just stacks and stacks of paper that just go into a file. And, you know, now, regardless of where I am, I have access to whatever pay app I need or whatever bit of information I need. And even my team, who may not be the most technically savvy, are much more comfortable in this environment and accessing, know how to get to that information when they need it.
Mhm. We saw really a few things change in regards to pen, paper versus, I guess, paperless. Um, the first was, you know, CRMs, customer relationship management solutions. Folks that would kind of track everything pen and paper and say, did I get this? Did I get this PO to this person? Right.
Mm.
That's over. They're using the CRM system.
Yep.
Whether it be Salesforce, Freshworks, whatever. That was the first. Second, you mentioned contracts, paperwork, documents. Done are the massive file cabinets and folders that people had to carry to job sites, and at the click of a button, you're on DocuSign or something else, and or you're running through your CRM and you can pull up anything you need. And then the third too, which, you know, if you're a end beneficiary of this, you loved it, is the paper check. That all of a sudden was left behind for ACHs and wire for payment.
Yeah.
And, you know, we obviously appreciate that, being able to get money in the hands of the folks that, you know, need it. And we also appreciate receiving payment faster. But all that aside, from an environmental perspective too, I am trying to think, I've tried to think about just how many thousands of pounds or millions of pounds of paper have we saved through the pandemic as a country doing this. And it's encouraging, you know, from an environmental perspective to consider that. From I guess from an organization perspective too, being able to access anything by typing in the name of something is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to lead to increases in efficiency. We had a guest on the show that was talking about one piece of technology he's utilizing. He's in the residential side, and they have now technology. A drone can fly around your home, tell you exactly how much and what you need to do a project. So it flies around, records some video or pictures and says, okay, great. You need X amount of lumber of this shape and size to do this project. And that was just
That's
something
incredible.
we hadn't seen. And we
Yeah.
had one guest on the show that was talking about, he thinks that the future of drywalling, for example, will be nearly 100% automated by robots. So what we're seeing in terms of technology and advancements in the field, I think is staggering. Three things that normally take a long time to adapt to change: farms, financial services companies, and construction.
Yeah.
It's just usually last to the field to change. And, it seems like your organization, excuse me, adapted a lot quicker than what we've seen to changes and to those changes.
I think part of that, Jeff, was because we are educators. That's our goal, right? Is to educate these young kids, these young people, and they're at the cutting edge of
Yes.
technology. It's still funny to me how many times we'll be in a meeting and somebody will say, "Wow, I wonder what blah blah blah," and we'll all just kind of stand around and look. And some of the younger kids that boom, they're on their phone. Oh, well, it's this, and you're like, all right, Google knows
Wow.
everything, right? And so the speed of information transfer and having access to it, and just not having the need to, okay, well, let's set up a meeting, let's check schedules. Well, it's going to take me 30 minutes to drive there. Hey, can we just hop on a Zoom call and do this and knock this out? Yes, absolutely. And you can do it from your desk or your home or wherever you are. And just being able to do that much more efficiently, I think has been a huge benefit for us as well. Contractors out on a job site, you can either FaceTime, take a picture of it, send it from your phone, and we can okay, let's all hop on a call. Let's discuss. This is what we think the solution needs to be. Everybody got it? Yep. Okay, Mr. Contractor, you move forward with it. We'll follow up with whatever documentation, email or PCO that we've got to sign and get on down the road with. But that has especially when it comes to school buildings where the first day of school does not change, and so that school's got to be ready. That has been a huge
Really
time.
good point. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
That has really helped us accelerate that and just cut down some unnecessary travel time or whatever it's taking to get these things moving forward and get off high center. It's been a huge benefit for us.
That's a really good point, and I want the viewers to consider that too. In some industries, the completion date can be malleable, depending on the field. But what you just mentioned, the school district, the students don't care what happens. All they know is they need to be in school at this time, this day,
Yep.
and it starts on whatever day, be it August or September of the year. And that is a hard deadline.
Yep. And you have to back that up with getting the furniture in there, making sure the phones, the clocks, all the technology's working. And so, I mean, there's probably a month right there. So, okay, we got mid-August. Well, actually, right after the 4th of July, if you're not close to being done, then we're in trouble. And
Yeah.
so, I kid our contractors because they always keep track of rain days, or we've got this many rain days. I'm like, great, what's that going to do for us come August?
Yeah.
We still got to be ready.
Well, what if the rain days change? As you mentioned, you guys have been getting swamped
Oh yeah,
the last couple of weeks.
last 2 weeks, nonstop.
Oh, now I'm curious too. One of the benefits in being in the field you're in, as long as the bonds are approved, work is steady, work is good. If you look at other industries, right? Well, other industries of construction, in terms of say commercial or cold storage or civil, what's your outlook for other sectors of construction? What do you see happening?
Well, especially like I said, our area, I think the residential market, especially for where I am specifically, because we've just got the land, it will continue to grow. This is a great area.
Mhm.
You're you're close to Fort Worth, you're close to Dallas Fort Worth Airport, you're close to Dallas, and so any major exhibit, concert, whatever, once things get back to normal, they come through this area. So I don't see that changing because of the location that we're in. We're in actually what's called the Alliance Corridor. So we have a huge amount of distribution centers. Amazon's got a huge distribution center here. Walmart has huge distribution centers here.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of, 500,000, million square foot tilt wall distribution centers that are just all over the place in this area. So that commercial construction is still going to be there. I honestly, Jeff, I'm not sure that there's one industry or one market sector in this area
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's not experiencing growth. It definitely did slow down. A lot of the private work, the privately funded work,
Mm-hmm.
slowed down this time last year during the pandemic. But we reaped the benefit of that, right? So some of these subs that their projects got put on hold, and all of a sudden we had a flood of labor into our projects, which was great for us. Now that is starting to, those private market projects are starting to pick back up. That's starting to even out a little bit, but I really don't. There's not one area that I can think of, not one market sector that's not experiencing some form of growth in this part of the country.
Agreed. Agreed. We're seeing it, especially again in the Southeast and the Midwest and the South. I guess the South as a whole, we're seeing it just on fire. It doesn't matter if you're in, critical facilities, if you're in civil, if you're even, even the remodeling, the remediation, all of those markets, one of our clients is a big player in the residential remodeling market. And they're, without revealing too much, I think they're going to do double the work this year than they did last year. And the year before that, it was, 80% more than the year before. And they're running into the same problems where they finding people and finding subcontractors to help with that work is nuts. So it's a good industry to be in. From a recruiter's perspective, you look at a lot of, you look at different recruiting firms. There's a ton of tech recruiting firms. There's a ton that do accounting and financing, a ton that do it. But when you look at actual construction recruiting firms, I think they make up less than 1% of the entire recruiting market, if that.
Yeah.
And I think there's an opportunity there for the folks that are in it and for the ones that do it well. As we shift, it's hard to believe we're almost halfway through 2021. Do you feel that, from a local perspective, you've kind of turned the tide and, 2020 is in the back view, or do you see any tail risks from 2020 kind of creeping up into your projects in 2021, 2022?
I think the thing that we're just going to have to accept and write out is just the increase in cost in construction. It's going to be here for, I would say, a solid 12 to 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then we hope things will stabilize a little bit. I don't know that the prices will ever come back down to where they were, but it's all supply and demand,
Mm-hmm.
So I think as long as we're still having a need to build homes, build schools, build commercially, that supply will be there, then we'll find that equilibrium in that pricing. So I don't know that there's any thing from this past year that's going to impact us just as much as the pricing. I think in Texas we've sort of opened the state back up. I think those that have been able to weather this storm have learned that how to continue to do things safely and keep themselves and their families safe, whether that's being vaccinated or just washing your hands more often, all those things we learned in elementary school. So I think there are some good lessons that we're going to learn. I mean, we bought a lot of equipment to help sanitize our schools. We're not going to stop doing that now because we saw the benefits of it. You know, we never had any one campus that had more than 1.5% of an infection rate or in the students or staff, because I think we were very diligent about doing things smartly.
Wow.
And enforcing the policies that the board and our superintendent put into place. And hopefully we'll learn the benefits of that and can be able to continue that while, you know, still being able to gather in groups and being able to do what we wanted to do. But, you know, we played football here this year. We had basketball, we wrestled, we
Wow.
did all our sports, and we never got close to that point where we're like, we might have to shut this down. And so I think we learned some valuable lessons in that we'll continue to use in the future and still get back to a normal semblance of daily life.
That's incredible. And I love hearing that. One thing that's going to be particularly interesting as 2021 rolls out is, we talked about this before. A lot of what we're seeing with suppliers to the industry and what we're seeing kind of on the street too is Q through Q4. I think prices may start to creep in and stabilize, because that's when we're seeing the supply chain finally starting to catch up. You know, and that likely we're seeing around September, October, where the supply chain really, you know, starts to catch up. But the next problem, I think, that places where everyone wants to be, the issue they're going to have to cope with, especially someone in at your organization, is what do we do with the massive influx of people now that they're here? You know, for example, the planning that could say, okay, we need one more high school. Does that one high school now become 2 or 3, and over what period? So I think that's something that a lot of municipalities are going to start to pay attention to, the places where everyone wants to go. I don't see that changing for a while. And an influx of new arrivals from other states and even from other places within Texas is great, but adjusting to that, planning for it, and then acclimating and accommodating, that's really the true test of how do we adjust to this.
Yeah, and so much of that for us, Jeff, is at the local level because we've got some big cities, you know, 300,000 people communities that handle how they want to run their school districts a lot differently than others. So like there are some communities that are like, man, we just want one high school, but that high school is massive. You know, it's going
Sure.
to have 8,000 students in it. But they're also, you know, they dominate every sport, and
Sure.
they like that, and so they want to keep it that way. The drawback to that is you've got probably some really good athletes that may never see the court, may never see the field, right? You may
Yeah.
have some great actors or folks in the band that just there's not a spot for them because of that.
Yeah.
We've got some other communities that are like, you know, we're a big city, but we're going to have 2,000 student or less high schools. Well, that means you're going to have 14, 15, 16 high schools in a
Yeah.
town of, you know, 300,000 people. So it's really, it depends on what that local community wants. But that's the impact that we're seeing. So if we get flooded with more and more people, it will accelerate how often we have to build these high schools. But I think our format of the size of schools that we want is what this community has said. Hey, we're comfortable with schools that size, and we want to keep it that way. And so that's what's going to impact the number of schools or how fast we have to build them. We built our last school, Eaton High School. We've got 3 high schools currently in Northwest ISD, and Eaton, the one Eaton Eagles, the one I'm wearing today. We built that one 7, 8 years ago. So we're probably going to have to build our 4th high school. It'll be in this next bond package. So that'll probably be getting started here in the next 4 years. My guess is as people continue to dump into that, so it's close to a 10-year cycle of when we have to build a high school. That's probably going to get cut down to 7 years, 5 years.
Got it.
That current trend of students right now, we're experiencing about anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 students a year coming into this area, and it's been that way pretty steadily. But I think as people see the benefit of moving into an area that's got this kind of land, and you've just got a few more options, and you have in a more densely populated area, that nice steady line is going to start to spike a little bit, and that'll change the dynamic for us.
And that answers my next question as I look at the time and get ready to wrap up here, which is what are you actually seeing as a change? And you nailed it. There's a lot that's in flux. Again, looking at the time, we're approaching the end. And Tommy, it was great having you on board. If someone wants to reach you for business, commercial purposes, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
My email address is the best, Jeff. And if I'd be happy to share that if you're okay with it.
Perfectly acceptable.
It's thomas.osborne, OSBORNE, at NISDTX.org. Honestly, from there, we can continue the conversation or find another way to communicate. But that's really the easiest way for anybody to reach out to me. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it, Jeff. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great chatting with you.